Okay, so we're going to start now. All right.
You ready? Let's
yes.
do
it. Whew. Let's start off with something easy. Why do you think the partnership with TAF works?
Number one is because we do the work before we start, which is we go into the staff, we tell them what it's going to look like, we tell them what our expectations are of them, and we get that commitment and that buy-in, and we get a good, solid principal that's going to work with the partnership. All of those things, those get ready things, I think are really important. And so when you have a reciprocal partnership where everybody's given and everybody's getting, that's when it works, and that's what TAF is.
I think one of the most important reasons why I believe it works is that we are aligned in our fundamental belief in the absolute responsibility we have to give our children every opportunity to be successful, and especially our scholars of color, many of whom would not have these opportunities. And I think the second reason the partnership works is that there is just a fundamental commitment to excellence. And that project-based approach, that personalized approach, and honestly, that approach that says we believe all scholars, each of them can do great things, that is a culminating sort of bond between our two organizations.
Do you believe that we as a state should and could move away from the notion of standardized tests and go more toward performance-based and competency-based assessments?
I have always understood the need for a common measure so that we can get sort of a big picture. But what we use that data for needs to change. And our emphasis on a single measure versus multiple measures, right, and formative assessments is simply not the answer. And we've got to move away from using the data to determine what our students need to be doing differently and focus on what we need to be doing differently. For all of the criticism, and I'll line up to give it to around No Child Left Behind. What it did do is it made us make sure that we were looking at every child. We could no longer look at our aggregate scores and say, our system's doing great. They're doing great. Yeah. But when you broke it down, and I will not use the term subgroups because I think that's wildly offensive, but when you look at specific groups of students, you were able to ignore some and tell a pretty story. Yeah. We no longer do that, but now we've gone to the other end and we're using data. We've almost weaponized it in some way, right? And we've got to come back to a better, more sane approach to assessment.
I think we've seen a big move in that kind of conversation, particularly during remote learning, about do we really need standardized testing since we haven't had it for the past couple of years? And the reliance on that single test score has really been probably detrimental to education. And so now the conversations that we're having at Seattle Public Schools is really around that. What does an assessment system look like? At Seattle Public Schools, we're looking at, standard-based grading for the first time, rather than just having an arbitrary grading system. What does it really mean? And what are the competencies tied to that grade? And then what are the assessments that are tied to that? But we are looking at a more robust assessment system that we were actually forced into as a result of this pandemic.
I would definitely be open to coming up or looking at and analyzing what other ways can we assess the brilliance of our children. Some of our standardized test scores are not nearly as high maybe as some of our districts in the region yet. We have some of the highest college going rates and second-year persistence data in the region. So our scholars do have those skills. And if we had just narrowed our opinion about their success related to standardized tests, we would be missing the boat.
What do you think it will take to move the needle for achievement among students of color?
Well, the things I've seen in Tacoma that I know are going to make a difference and that we have to accelerate the use of and continue is, number one, high expectations. When you walk into a classroom and the teacher expects everybody to perform well, they do.
We are working to make sure that no child in Highline is invisible and every child is connected. And so I've asked our school staff this year during distance learning to assign an adult in the building to every kid. And they check in with that student on a weekly basis to build that relationship. Now, I know that might not sound as technical or as out there, but that does not happen by design and with intention in our school systems. It happens, a lot. Teachers are doing it all the time, but systematically, are we reaching out to every student to really know who they are and then figure out how do we engage them in their own learning? And we need to be doing that for every child, but with a specific focus on those children who have historically been underserved, which is probably a kind word for it, by our public school systems.
So what advice would you give to other superintendents who are either, heard about TAF or thinking about something like a partnership with TAF? What advice would you give them in terms of preparation and what to expect?
We are at a place where we are seeing the inequities that have happened and played out all across our country. We're at a place in our country where we are seeing the historical barriers that have been placed for scholars. So we have not been able to see the brilliance of all of our babies. And, often people will think, well, there are all these gaps. How do we solve it? Most people don't know we've got a program right in our school district where kids are graduating at rates that are 4 or 5 times higher than you have across the state, maybe across the country. Mm-hmm. And it isn't some secret as to how you do that. And I would say to any superintendent looking to partner, here is a program that is built on the fundamental belief of our young people. You have to be committed to that work around equity. And I think that's why it's worked, is because it's deep. It's in our DNA to want to do that type of work. But I think that fundamentally, it's great for kids.
If you are a district that really believes in providing a quality education for students of color furthest from educational justice, and you want a partner whose values align with that mission and that philosophy, then TAF is your partner you should be looking at. And, be prepared to have a partner that's going to be engaged with you, that's collaborative in its process.
What is one radical thing that you want to do, it could be with or without TAF, for your whole district?
I believe scholar voice and scholar input is the key to transforming our schools. So we have these advisories. How can we actually embed them in every fundamental aspect of schooling? And I think when we listen to them and let them teach us how to teach them, great things can happen.
I want a demonstrated proficiency with all the things we talk about around equity and student voice. We need to stop talking about it and demonstrate it and have recognized demonstrations of what that looks like. And who takes culturally responsive teaching? It's those people who want to be culturally responsive, and they're at every training. And then you have some that never come. Well, let me tell you, we are counting numbers. No more voluntary. Mandatory with support.
Yes.
And mandatory with coaching. I know we can do it. We are small enough and big enough to pull it off.
Yes.
And so that's what I want to do.
I love it. I love it. This was great. This was really good.
Thank you so much, Trish. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Trish. Always proud to be a partner with TAF.
Thank you, Trish. It's always awesome to see you and be involved with anything that TAF is doing.
Thank you for the powerful partnership. And we're excited about what we know is going to be an even better future.
That's great. That was it. That was good. Thank you.